Towering mountains, vast deserts, sprawling rivers, and a long coastline shaped the land of California long ago. This was the home of many different Native American groups before Europeans arrived. These early people learned to live in this varied land, developing clever ways to survive and thrive. They built special boats to travel the waters, used beautiful shells as a form of money, and relied on a tiny nut, the acorn, as a main food source. Life in prehistoric California was far from simple. It was a time of great change, clever inventions, and strong communities. How did these people build such rich lives in a land so diverse? The earliest humans in California were the Clovis people, found mostly inland. Stone points were found near ancient Lake Borax and Lake Tular, where many fluted points existed. Along the coasts, Clovis-era sites suggest people used boats and ate seafoods like shellfish and fish. Much evidence is now underwater due to rising sea levels. Cross Creek has a large shell pile of over 10,000 years old. It also had grinding tools showing small seeds were eaten early. This suggests some early Americans might have arrived from the coast. Diablo Canyon shows shellfish and fish were eaten between 9,300 and 8,900 years ago. The Harris site in Southern California is part of the Western Stem tradition. Around 11,700 years ago, the climate became drier and warmer. The Clovis culture changed into Western Stemmed tradition, lasting from about 10,000 to 9,000 years ago. Their tools included crescents and different points. Many used Western North America's lakes, hunting small animals and gathering plants and fish. By 8,500 years ago, many lakes dried up. In the Sierra Nevada foothills, the Skyrocket site shows early tools over 9,000 years old, including grinding tools. This suggests people began to settle down more. Around 9,000 years ago, warming climate changed available plants and animals, leading to new ways of life. Grinding tools became common. Large, long-term shell piles mean some groups became less nomadic earlier than thought. As people lived along the coasts, boat use became vital for food and travel. Evidence from Diablo Canyon confirms shellfish and fish were regular meals. The northern Channel Islands hold clues about early boat technology. At Daisy Cave on San Miguel Island, human presence dates back to 1,200 years, with piles of shells. Evidence of intense fishing suggests boats were used. Sandals and ropes, similar to those of the Chumash, support their long presence. The Eel Point site on San Clemente Island has a large shell pile from around 10,000 years ago. Early boat building proof from around 8,000 years ago was found here. Whalebone house pits suggest settled fishermen lived there between 8,900 and 5,500 years ago. Better boat technology led to more reliable food and larger settlements. During the Middle Holocene, sea mammal hunting and shellfish collecting grew. Ocean-going boats were built near Santa Barbara to hunt marine animals. In San Francisco Bay, sea otter hunting became important around 2,600 years ago. Net weights and fishhooks allowed open water fishing. Around 850 years ago, canoes became more important near Santa Barbara. When Europeans arrived, the Chumash people used large plank canoes called tomals. These tomals carried goods and people between islands and the mainland. They were made by fastening shaped planks together and sealing them with tar. The tomal is considered the oldest known ocean-going boat in North America. Leaders controlled these important vessels, showing their power and the boat's economic role. Other boats included dugout canoes and tool boats. In Northern California, tribes made large dugout canoes from redwood trees for fishing, trade, and war. Tool boats, made from bundled reeds, were quick to build and used in calm waters for transport and gathering. Shell mounds in San Francisco Bay suggest tool boats were used to gather shellfish. For many in prehistoric California, the acorn was a hugely important food. California had many oak trees producing acorns. Turning acorns into food was very hard work and took much time. Acorns were easy to gather in autumn and could be stored. To make them edible, the nut was shelled, crushed into powder with mortar, then soaked in water to remove bitter acid. It then became a nutritious mush or bread. Mortar and pestle tools spread across California, showing acorns were widely used. These tools left tiny stone particles in food, wearing down teeth. Evidence of worn teeth on human remains after 5,000 years ago strongly supports widespread acorn use. Reliance on acorns led to more people and complex social systems. Many economies focused on acorns. By about 3,000 years ago, acorn use grew throughout California, causing large population growth and more complex social groups. While abundant, acorns were hard to process. As other foods became scarcer, more work was needed. In Sacramento Valley, people focused heavily on acorns and salmon by 3,000 years ago. In the Sierra Nevada, acorn use also grew. People even returned to the mountains permanently to use acorns. The hard work of processing acorns, combined with their abundance, led to big changes in tools, society, and population size, suggesting a more settled life. A system of trade helped societies grow complex. Many prehistoric Californians used shell beads as money. Trade networks spread far across the land. Shell beads from coastal California have been used for about 9,000 to 10,000 years. The purple olive shell, Olivella biplicata, was common for beads. The Chumash people were skilled at making these, crafting about 160 different kinds, used as money and to show status. Chumash shell beads were made in Santa Barbara and traded widely throughout California and beyond. Spire removed Chumash beads from 6,000 to 7,000 years ago have been found in the Great Basin, showing Chumash's key role in the economy. Other groups also used shell beads. The Kumeyaay in Palm Springs used beads traded from other groups to make their own shell money. Specific lengths of beads meant different amounts of money, showing a complex system. Native Americans of Southern California had a strong trade system when the Spanish arrived. The Kumeyaay people traded with groups like the Mojave, exchanging eagle feathers for salt, tobacco, acorns, and baskets for other foods. Most trading was bartering, but some stories tell of food traded directly for shell beads. Chumash trade with outside groups is clear. They sent wooden items inlaid with shell to the Kitenemuk and received red ochre from the Mojave. They sent soapstone vessels to the Solinans and shell beads to the Mojave. They also received fish, obsidian, salt, and seeds from others. From about 2,600 to 650 years ago, shell bead making for money greatly increased in Santa Barbara. This growth shows societies and political systems became more complex. Trade also grew in the Sierra Nevada, with obsidian moving west and shells moving east. In the Central Valley, shell bead money was key. Long-distance trade networks formed between Imperial Valley and Colorado River regions. Around 400 years ago, Europeans arrived. About 500,000 to 700,000 Native Americans lived in California, with many cultures. But European arrival brought huge problems. Diseases like smallpox spread quickly, causing many deaths. There were also conflicts and changes to their way of life as Europeans took land. This marked a sad time for many old traditions, but the spirit and knowledge of these early Californians live on through their families and new discoveries. Over thousands of years, California's early societies grew and changed. Around the Middle Holocene, conditions improved, leading to larger populations and more complex social systems. By 5,000 years ago, sea level stabilized, creating sandy beaches and marshes, making coastal areas appealing for settlement. People could build homes without constant worry about floods. Even with acorns as a main food, hunting increased and economies diversified. Shellfish and sea mammal hunting became common along coasts, and salmon fishing grew inland. Human site numbers and sizes increased greatly. In Northern California, people focused on acorns and salmon. Along the Central Coast, mortar and pestle tools were used, and people likely settled more, relying on acorns and hunting. In San Francisco Bay, around 5,500 years ago, people ate many shellfish, seen in huge shell piles. Some think these were more than trash heaps. Between 6,500 and 5,500 years ago, sites decreased across California, suggesting population drops during a warmer period. Shellfish numbers also dropped, but increased later as the climate cooled and became wetter. Along the Santa Barbara coast, human sites grew, suggesting population growth. Acorns became the most important food, along with fishing. Marine mammals were hunted, showing ocean-going boats were built. Nearly 3,000 years ago, Santa Barbara populations grew again. People began specializing in jobs like making acorn bread, making societies more complex. In the Sacramento Valley, there was a huge increase in human activity, especially using acorns and salmon. Mortars and pestles became common by 5,000 years ago. By about 2,500 years ago, different groups like Hokan and Penutian spread into the valley, forming large villages. Burial practices showed men were often buried with many artifacts. Warfare may have been frequent, with broken bones and stone points found. Skulls buried alone might have been war trophies. In the San Joaquin Valley, diverse life existed. Penutian Yokut groups moved in around 3,500 years ago. Between 5,000 and 1,500 years ago, the Martis complex used basalt tools, manos, and metates for seed processing. Abstract rock art also spread. The Colorado Desert is a dry area. People living there during the Middle Holocene were diverse hunter-gatherers. The Indian Hill Rock Shelter was a hunting camp started around 4,000 years ago. By about 3,000 years ago, acorn use grew greatly across California. Populations increased dramatically, and social groups became more complex. Many societies Europeans later met likely began then. Some groups became complex chiefdoms. Large mammals, seeds, and shellfish grew scarce, but acorns remained plentiful, though hard to process. More labor was needed for food. Population growth led to resource competition and increased warfare, spurring social complexity. In Northern California, the Berkeley pattern was dominant from about 2,500 to 1,500 years ago. Political systems and trade became advanced. Settled villages may have formed along rivers. The bow and arrow began to be used around 1,500 years ago. Shell beads became currency, and group boundaries grew important. In San Francisco Bay, around 2,600 years ago, hunting sea otters became a main focus. Along the Central Coast, acorns, land hunting, and fishing became more important than sea mammals and shellfish. Net weights and fish hooks appeared around 2,600 years ago, leading to open water fishing. The Santa Barbara region was very active in the late Holocene. From about 2,600 to 650 years ago, shell bead production for money greatly increased, showing more social and political complexity. Around 1,500 years ago, settled villages appeared, becoming the main settlement by 700 years ago. Trade between mainland and islands increased, with some fighting. Around 850 years ago, shell bead making, canoe use, and job specialization grew. The Chumash were complex chiefdoms with large villages, using plank canoes for trade, controlled by leaders. Other coastal Southern California groups also grew in complexity. Trade was very active. A major event in Southern California was the arrival of Takik groups around 3,500 years ago. They brought new ways of burying dead, organizing settlements, and managing their economy. For Takik groups, reliance on sea resources decreased, but fish became more important. In the Sierra Nevada, acorn use grew stronger in the late Holocene. Populations increased and new stone points appeared. Large permanent villages grew along rivers. Trade expanded, with obsidian moving west and shells moving east. Around 1,500 years ago, a warming trend began, and populations likely dropped. By about 700 years ago, climate cooled, and people returned to live in the mountains permanently for acorns. Many large villages appeared along rivers. In the Central Valley, populations grew, and large villages were established. Resource use became more intense. In the Sacramento Valley, groups lived in large villages, focusing on acorns and fish. Overall, acorn and small animal use increased, while large mammals and fish decreased. This shows population growth, leading to competition and less movement. Burials suggest fights over dwindling resources. While rare, pottery was made in the lower Sacramento Valley by the Cosumnes brown ware tradition. Large villages were known for complex ceremonies and economies with trade systems. Shell bead currency began, and social complexity increased. Around 1,500 years ago, the Colorado Desert population rose. Beginning about 1,300 years ago, Human farming groups influenced the area. After 1,000 years ago, cultural traits like pottery, small points, and cremation appeared, spreading from other areas or brought by new people. Long-distance trade networks formed. One important feature was Lake Cahuilla, a large lake that appeared and disappeared many times when the Colorado River changed course. It appeared and disappeared several times, most recently between 800 and 500 years ago. Humans adapted. When present, the lake offered stable food, supported large populations and villages. When it dried, groups focused on permanent springs and land-based resources. At contact with Europeans around 400 years ago, an estimated 500 to 700,000 people lived in California. These were thriving, complex societies. Unfortunately, their numbers were greatly reduced by diseases brought by Europeans and conflicts. Their ways of life were challenged and disrupted. Some suggest complex Native American groups developed to manage European trade goods. However, while trading began immediately, population still declined greatly due to new diseases. The large population figures before contact show significant societies, and the quick decline due to disease highlights the immense and tragic consequences of European arrival, a key turning point in California's history. The story of prehistoric California shows human cleverness and strength. It is a story of how people learned to travel waters, create complex economies, and use the land's gifts. If you found this journey through ancient California fascinating, please give this video a like. Subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into history, and let us know in the comments what other ancient cultures you would like us to explore. Oh, and make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss our next adventure into the past.